works like paper please, right? Where we experience being in a totalitarian regime and we have to make difficult moral decisions and see their outcomes. Or, of course, in something like The Sims, right? I mean, and I watched a 14-year-old getting totally distraught when she learned that water was cut off and power was cut off because her Sims didn't have a job. Right? That was very clearly learning about consequences, right? Right, and interactors can learn about complex personal and social dynamics in works like Facade or Prom Week, which is about trying to find a prom partner with 1 week to go in very complex social dynamics in an American high school. So I think IDN enables understanding by temporarily cognitively reducing complexity but not eliminating it. What you see here is one path taken through an IDN, and this is of course the linear path, but next time I can go again and make other decisions, so the complexity is preserved in the system. So IDN can support multiple, often competing perspectives, enable decision making and show how a series of decisions lead to an outcome, also enable replay for seeing different outcomes. It can even integrate life-changing data and personalized solutions. Right? So the power of narrative combined with the strength of procedural systems make IDN an expression for our complex times. And of course it has the potential effect to increase systemic thinking, enable understanding of complex topics. There's a paper on that. I mean, of course, this is the problem space that we're working in, yes, and we thought about making that into an IDN, yes, in case you're thinking that. So there's still many things to work on. And this is what we do as a network in COST. We have now 230 members, 40 countries. We will have more publications coming. We work in several working groups here. And we will also publish the Routledge Encyclopedia of IDN, which will be open access, and it's upcoming. Here's some additional grants. Current projects. So we work on IDN in education. We will publish very soon templates for bachelor's and master's program in interactive digital narratives. We have mapped it all out in terms of credits and for both European and American systems. It will be downloadable, and we have first ideas how to take them up and implement the first program in this area. We're also working on getting IDN into K through 12, it means kindergarten through 12th grade. We have several projects in there and a publication coming out next week or in 2 weeks. We work on ethics for IDN creation because that's an important problem. We have published the first framework for that and hope that many people will help us develop it further. And of course, decolonial aspects are also important, and here is the first paper on that, and the next one will also come out in 2 weeks. And there was a project where we put up a decolonial analysis and put together students from Sweden and Colombia to exchange their opinions and identify colonial aspects. We just had our Sophia stakeholder meeting in INTCO. Our stakeholders are now Child Health International, World Economic Forum, UN Human Rights Monitor, and United Nations Training and Research Institute. Here's some of the work. And here is another work actually that came out of this network, which makes me very happy to see. I was able to connect Eva here from Child Health International to MATS, and MATS company has created a training tool for people on the border regions of Ukraine that try to prevent human trafficking, right? And this is a very concrete thing we were able to do together and make happen. Of course, I mean, it was Matt's company, but I mean, it really shows the power of the IDN, and this is now deployed in the field. It's been translated to Russian and Ukrainian, and this is sort of a concrete thing. Okay, wrapping up. Interactive digital narratives are novel forms of narrative which are dynamic and reactive and turn the audience into participants. The SPP model and the triple hermeneutics describe it. They provide specific opportunities for expressing topics and creating experience difficult or impossible in traditional forms. And that's really the opportunity. IDN can be used as systemic representations of complexity. They can promote systemic thinking, are key to enable discourse on complex topic. And of course, it remains a challenge, right? Because we need to have more theory development, we need to understand what are the design conventions we can use. And of course, it's not a game system building, UI, UX, complex issue understanding, big data, all of that comes together here, but let's work on that together. Again, come to iKids, watch the conference, see the proceedings, well, get the book. Right? And if you're interested, I printed out some flyers here, which gives you a 30% off coupon. So yes, that's enough. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Hartmut, for that wonderful talk, very thought-provoking, and I'm sure we have some questions. We don't have a lot of time, but if you have a few quick questions, any questions for Hartmut?
No questions.
No questions? Your minds are blown?
These were 200 slides, by the way, still wondering.
Stefan, yeah?
Yeah, thanks a lot for your great talk. I have a question, not to you, but maybe to the group from Sandy Lushar and so on, because you referenced this narrative paradox.
Right.
I have to admit, I'm one of these lecturers who still have this in the slides. So maybe to Jenny and Daisy, so maybe you can briefly say how you handle it with Sandy Lushar and I have in mind the paper by Sandy Lushar and
right.
Ruth Eilert, with this narrative paradox thing, and how is it taught at your group or at the university?
So how is it taught? So the problem we have is that our IGN stuff is very kind of isolated, and there's not too much kind of like preamble before it or after it. So it's one of these things where we kind of try and fit in a very small amount of time. But we tend to try and focus on less of the technical side of it. So we'll use things like twine, things like that as like a sort of like really basic intro. But yeah, unfortunately we don't get an opportunity to do as much of that kind of thing.
I think from my side, I would just say that almost everything you've said also applies to interactive analog narratives. And I'm a big kind of ambassador for the power of analog, you know, and apart from the procedural aspects, basically everything here applies to analog interactive narratives as well. So that's how I approach it. I focus on analog solutions when they're more appropriate than digital solutions.
I mean, if you want me to say something about that, I think...
what can I use instead, or to clarify this? We have slides to clarify this.
I think the problem of this idea of the narrative paradox, which is Ruth Eilert's Koenitz from 1999, right? And so, of course, it will be used in her papers. To me, this is somewhat of a misunderstanding, because, I mean, this type of narrative coherence is a narrative coherence from books and movies. And again, this creates what I'm working against. I mean, we will never have the same type of experience in an IDN that we have in a movie and a book. And that's fine. Because if we're constantly comparing, if we want to be like Citizen Kane, if we want to be like Lord of the Rings, then there's no need to make an IDN. Right? So this idea of narrative coherence, and I mean, I love Ruth, but I mean she's also a poet, right? She's also a writer, right? She's published volumes of poetry. Right? And I think that's part of the issue here in a sense. She thinks of a narrative coherence that we will not have in IDN, and that's fine. Plus, I think narrative coherence in an IDN work is not the sole responsibility of the author. It is at least partially the responsibility of the interactor, and that's what makes this form interesting. So for me, this is based on a wrong understanding. It doesn't mean that it's always easy, right? But yeah, I mean, we should not take ideas and concepts from the movie and the book and apply them to a dynamic artifact, and then things that makes things interesting. No, it creates works where we often think, oh, that would have been better as a real movie. Right? Or why do I have to click all the time if it doesn't mean anything? Right? So, yeah.
There's one final question in the back there, yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm still processing those 200 slides, but maybe you can help me a little bit.
Sure.
With my understanding. If I have it right, that interactive narrative can be compared with live interaction role play like Mark.
Yes.
Like everybody, or the system and the player or the audience is interacting and thus creating, let's say, a different story or influencing the story, creating a sub-story and so on.
Yes, I mean, it can certainly be compared, and you also read, I mean, so, you know, I'm very much influenced by Janet Murray, and she describes exactly that in Hamlet on the holodeck. I mean, at the same time, I mean, in a sense, we're still creating a concrete dynamic digital system. And that's why I also sort of shy away from saying I'm understanding interactive narrative. Because, yes, of course, I see a lot of overlap with interactive analog narrative, and I also have a short passage in the book where I describe that. But I mean, in terms of an analysis, you know, with the digital, I have a concrete thing that I can analyze. With basically all forms of analog interactive narratives, I would need the brain sort of as a, and that makes things difficult, right? So and written description, yeah, I mean, I cannot really grasp the object of analysis as clearly. At least that's how I see it, and that's why I kind of shy away from it. I mean, people have told me that before, right? Oh, this applies to tabletop role-playing games. That applies to logs. Yes, it does, with exactly that difference. You still have a created digital system.
Okay. Yeah.
Right?
Great. Let's thank Hartmut one more time.